Hello my quilting friends! My name is Leah Day, and in this video we're going to learn how to make this beautiful 12 petals, both curved and pointy, Dresden ring. So let's get started making our curved edge petals first, and for that we're going to need to create our turning template. And we might as well go on ahead and knock out all of these all at once so they're done for the year. You're going to need this diagram. This is included in the instructions that come with your Dresden template set. Just unfold this and grab a piece of freezer paper. Yes, freezer paper that you can get at the grocery store, and just cut yourself a nice little sheet about the size of a sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11. That works great. Now, this is what you don't want to do. I made this mistake and then I thought, wow, that was really dumb, Leah, because you need each template to stand alone. You need that shape by itself. But since I already went on ahead and drew it, I thought, hey, somebody else might make that same mistake too. So I wanted to show it to you. Don't do this, instead do this. So here you can see I have that biggest shape traced by itself, the middle shape traced, and then our smallest shape traced. And I went on ahead and labeled these corresponding with how many petals that they work with, and this is our 8 petal. You can see how that nicely fits on. And this curved turning template, you can see that it's going to come in smaller than the template itself by about 1/2 inch. And the reason is we need fabric in order to be able to turn that edge. So this does shrink the size of your Dresden plate, but that's okay. It's still going to turn out great. It's going to look amazing. If you want a curved edge that goes all the way to this outer edge that you can cut here, simply do a fused edge instead. And you can refer to the video I did, Dresden plate block number 1, our first ring of this year, used that and did a fused edge instead. So here's what I started with. I traced all of my pieces, all of those templates, onto the paper side of freezer paper. So one side's waxy, one side's paper, and I just traced that with one of these Sharpie pens. I really love these, and the thing I love about it is it doesn't smear. That's the thing you want to keep in mind. And then now I'm going to take this and I'm going to press it to my firm pressing board, because you know, we want a turning template. We want it to be stiff and stable. We don't want it to be floppy and wiggly. And as it is, freezer paper is, you know, one single layer of it, unless it's seriously heavy duty stuff, it's not all that stiff. So I'm going to press this down so that way it's firmly attached to my firm pressing board. And if you're wondering how to build something like this, I do have a video on it, so definitely check that out. I'm pretty sure that's leahday.com/press. All right, another thing that this does, by doubling it, I'm just going to layer another piece of freezer paper on top, waxy side down, so my paper is side up. And I'm going to press this in place, and what this also does is this encapsulates the pen marks. So if you're worried about those pen marks somehow transferring to your fabrics, well, this pretty much takes care of that. Now I am using a little Clover craft iron. This is, you know, it's kind of silly, but I love it because it doesn't have steam, it doesn't take water, it just is a little powerful, mighty craft iron, but it's not really doing the job for this right here. I want a super hot iron for this. So I'm going to move over to my other pressing board, give this a quick press, and then we'll be ready to cut our turning templates out. Okay, I'm going to roughly cut these out, just using my 60mm cutter to just slice right through the paper. And you can see just how nice and stiff that is. That's going to be really easy to turn against. Now, if you want it even stiffer, do a 3rd layer on top of it. That can't hurt. It really can't, and it will just make it stiffer and easier to turn and get a really nice curved edge. All right, let's take our 12 petal, because that's the one that we're going to be working with today. And I am going to grab that template, and here's a trick. The whole bottom part of the template, the straight lines all the way down the side, down the bottom edge, and up that end, all of that is identical between the plate and the turning template. So you can just line this up really nicely and make sure that it's lined up just exactly right. There we go. And you can just use those edges to help you cut. So the only thing that you really have to freehand cut with scissors is going to be that curved edge. rotate this around. One more trim right there. Okay, so there's 3 edges cut, and now I'm going to take it, nice sharp pair of scissors, and I'm just going to very carefully follow that marked line that I have drawn, and it's underneath a layer of freezer paper, so if you can't see that well, of course remark it. Make sure that you can see it clearly and that you're going to create a nice smooth curved line. So there we go. That is how you're going to create all of the turning templates for all of your Dresden plates. Anytime that you want a turned curved edge, this is how you're going to do it. Go on ahead and make all of the turning templates you're going to need this year for our petal number 2, 4, and 6. Okay, now it's time to use our turning template to turn the edges of our petals. And I am using 6 petals cut out using template number 4. This is our 12 curved petal Dresden plate. So I'm going to take this, and I already pressed that turning template to the wrong side of the fabric. And what this does is it gives us a nice smooth edge that we're going to then be able to turn this fabric over and achieve that beautiful curved edge with that petal end. Okay, so I have taken some liquid spray starch. This is just regular starch you get at the grocery store, good stuff. And I have sprayed a little bit in the bottom of this cap, and I have a paintbrush here. And I'm just gonna paint on a little bit, maybe about an inch over that area. And then I'm going to roll that edge over the turning template and then dry it using the tip of my iron. And this is just a hot, dry little iron, no steam, and that helps to dry that starch quickly, and that allows us to get that nice curved edge. Now you might be wondering, okay, why don't you just spray the whole thing with starch? That's too much liquid. It will interact with the paper. Freezer paper is paper, and too much liquid will basically just tear the freezer paper up. It will, it'll go soggy and soft, and you won't be turning anything against it. You'll have to make yourself another turning template. So you need to be able to control the amount of liquid that you're working with. That's why I use a paintbrush. That's why I only apply a little bit at a time, so that way I'm not getting an excessive amount of liquid right up against my turning template. I'm not making a mess. I'm just getting the right amount of starch in the right place so I can affect that turn. And you probably saw me nearly burn myself with my iron. I oftentimes will grab a pair of tweezers. These are embroidery tweezers, and they're so handy because you can just grab that fabric and just nip it right into place, and then give that iron, you know, nice firm press, and then you don't have your fingers in the way. You're not risking getting your fingers singed, and I love that. So a little bit more starch here, just one last little bit right along that edge. And really a lot of fabric manipulation techniques like this, turning things under, turning things over, that kind of stuff, it's really just about control. You know, it's about controlling the fabric and getting it to do what you want. And if you've been struggling with these Dresden plates, if you have found them tricky, they're not lining up right, or they're not going down onto the background fabric well, might be a sign that you need more control over the fabric. If it's going all loosey-goosey, wiggly-wobbly on you, starch will help with that. Starching and pressing your fabric before cutting is something I do all the time because it just gives me that control. The stiffer the fabric, the more control you have. Okay, so that is how I turned those edges nicely. Give that one more press, and you can just set your iron on it. I would have to say the criticism I have on this iron, it's very lightweight and it doesn't get super hot super quick. So I'm actually looking for a dry iron that has a little bit more weight, a little bit more heft to it. And I'll let you know what I find, guys, because having that little extra weight can really help with an iron. Okay, so we have quite a lot of fabric folded over. I'm going to trim this down to about 1/4 of an inch. It could be a little bit narrower, but I like that. That works. You just don't need all of that extra fabric, and that would just make it a little bit bulky on the back side of your Dresden plate. There we go. Give it one more press. And then we just gently remove that turning template. So just peel the fabric away very gently. This is another thing, starching your fabric allows you to be able to do things like that without it just winging around, getting all wiggly wobbly on you, right? So there we go. One more press. That is how you're going to turn 6 of your petals. Now the other 6 are going to be pointy petals, and we've done these now twice this year. They're very, very easy to do. I'm going to talk you through it. What we're going to do is we're going to take those petals and fold them in half. So these are cut out with template number 3, the 12 pointy petal Dresdens. There we go. So you're going to fold it in half, right sides together. Take it to your machine, and on this wide edge, you're going to stitch a 1/4 inch from that edge and back stitch at the beginning and end of that seam. And this is what it'll look like whenever you get that stitched. I am stitching with pink thread, so you might not be able to see that all that well, but basically it's just a thin line of stitching right across the top edge of that petal shape. There we go. I'm going to clip that folded area just to reduce the bulk, and I'm clipping that a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch from the stitching, and that allows me to turn this around nicely. So I'm going to take it, put my fingers in it, I'm going to finger press that seam allowance open. There we go, open and flat. Then I'm going to take my thumb, put it inside of it, turn it right side out. So there we go, starting to see a point coming around. And then I want to take my scissors. You put your scissors together and the tip won't be quite so pointy. You won't jab through your fabric. There we go. You can just give it a little poke, and then you have a nice pointy petal. And you have that crease line where we folded the whole petal in half. We have that crease line running down it. You can line up that seam line with that crease line. Just hold that all in place, give it a nice press, and you're ready to go. There we go. So you're going to make 6 petals that are pointy like this. You're going to make 6 petals that are curved edge like this. And then just like the other ones that we've done so far, we are going to turn, or I should say the last one, the last number 2, we did a straight edge inside, and that's what we're going to do here. Now you can do something else if you want to finish this inside edge differently, that's fine too, but I think it'll look really cute to turn this under and just have a little, I guess that would be a decagon, 12-sided figure to the inside. There we go. And all this is just a piece of freezer paper, 1 inch wide with a 1/4 inch line. So it's a line marked a 1/4 inch from the edge of that strip, and that allows me to fold that edge up nice and accurately. So there we go. That is how we're going to prep up our petals for this particular Dresden ring. And now let's piece them together. I am going to place these like this and piece 4 sets together in sets of 2. And I'm going to start up here at this inner edge, back stitch and stitch on down. And I will stitch all the way off that folded curve down here at the bottom. That might be a little bit confusing, but we know that we want that stitching line to extend all the way down so we can easily fold that seam allowance over. So that's why we do it that way. And I like to start on the inside because I know if I have folded that over accurately, then everything's going to line up really nice. So I pieced those together in sets of 2, and then I added 1 more petal to create sets of 3, and you're going to create 2 that look like this, and they have 2 pointy petals and 1 curved petal. And you're going to create 2 sets that look like this, and they have 2 curved petals with a pointy petal in the middle. And now it's time to make our plate or ring. This is technically a ring because we don't have a center. There we go. And so all you're going to do is piece these together in sets of 2, and then piece those 2 together to create that finished ring. And here's what it looks like once I get that stitched together, and I've got all of these little seam allowances. I'm going to press those open initially. This is always what I do. I always press my seam allowances open. And now lately, whenever I think about the quilt and how I'm going to quilt it, if I'm planning on long arm quilting it, then I press the seams to one side. And the reason I do that now is because my long arm has a much bigger needle, and if I am planning on stitching this in the ditch, which I might, I have found that that needle can sometimes hit those seams and cause them some problems. So I have found with that specific combination, long arm quilting, stitching in the ditch, I need to press those seams to one side. So, but I like to get the full expression of the seam first. That's why I press the seams open and flat. You can see just how nice and flat that turns out. Absolutely gorgeous. And then now I'm going to take the purple and I'm going to flip that over because the blue is the darker color, and I'm going to press those purple seam allowances over to the blue. Now it's time to prep up our background fabric for our Dresden ring. I'm just going to take this square, I think I cut this around 14 inches square, and I'm just pressing it. I'm just putting in some creases in both directions, so that way I have kind of a guideline to be able to line this up with my Dresden plate. So here we go. And I mean, of course, this is optional. If you would rather, have the plate over here, you can do that too. But if you want it nicely centered, I should say, if you want your plate nicely centered, then this is the way to do it. Line up some seam lines, or you could line up the points, although you don't have points in this direction. So I think I'm going to line up the seam lines here in order to line this up nicely and get it right in the center. Okay, now I've had a few questions about gluing these down, so I figured I'd go over that. Whenever I'm gluing anything, and certainly something kind of complicated, you want to go slowly and be a little methodical about it. And I found definitely working on half of the Dresden at once can be really helpful. So here I'm going to make sure that this is all in place and where I want it, and then I'm going to flip over to expose the side, and I'm just going to glue the inner ring first. And I have Elmer's glue in a little micro tip bottle, and Elmer's glue is basically liquid starch. It's a thicker version of liquid starch, and I've been using it in my quilts for years, no problem. So I use this a lot, but you want to be able to, again, control it. Be able to control how much you use, otherwise it can really make a mess on your fabric. Even the smallest glue bottle of Elmer's glue they have, and trust me, I've tried every single one, it doesn't work. You really need to put it in a micro tip bottle like this. So I sell these on leahday.com. You can find two. I use one for glue and one for oil for my sewing machine. So there we go. I have that applied. I want to make sure that that particular seam allowance doesn't wing out. So I'm going to get it flipped over here and just make sure to poke at that and make it lay flat. There we go. You can always grab those tweezers if you have some tweezers too, and work those seam allowances out as well. There we go. Now it's doing what it's supposed to do under there. If you feel it and it's kind of, something's going on, you flip it back over again and play with it until it gets right. There we go. So that is how I'm going to press and dry that glue so it dries quickly, and then now it holds. It's a nice temporary hold for that fabric. That's why I really like it. All right, now I'm going to apply more glue. I'll make sure that that seam allowance behaves. There we go. And it's just a thin line right along that edge. And this is really temporary because, however you decide to secure your plate to the background, whether it's with hand stitching, and I have another video on that, or with machine stitching, you can really do whatever you want to as far as how you secure this to the background fabric. I am using just a simple straight stitch both to the inside, just right along that folded edge. I'm doing a simple straight stitch with my machine, and then along the outer edge too, and that works great. It's very quick, very easy. I don't like to use a thick stitch, satin stitch or something like that, because I feel like that's really chunky and can distract from the Dresden plate. There we go. Okay, so once I get half of the inside secured, then I can flip over and do maybe 2 or 3 petals at a time for the outer edge. So here we go, applying that glue all the way around that curve and around that point. That looks great. Just press that in place with my hand, make sure it's lined up nicely, and then hit it with my hot dry iron. So I'm just going to work my way around this plate, working about 2 petals at a time to get it completely secured. And that is it for our 3rd Dresden ring. And this one, you know, you could do this as a plate, you could do this as a ring. If you want it to be a plate, just put an applique circle and pop that right on top. Totally up to you, but it definitely shows you the range. When you cut these rings with wider petals, they end up looking a lot more like plates, simply because the rings are so much bigger. Whenever we work with those more delicate ones, like our first ring, and the pieces are thinner, then it has a much more delicate look. So just something to keep in mind as we play with these Dresden templates. So I hope that you have enjoyed this video and creating this beautiful pointy and curved Dresden ring with me today. If you'd like to find more of these videos, come and check them out, along with our Dresden template set at leahday.com/Dresden. Until next time, let's go quilt.